Elliot Onal Eastman had always been the kind of person who embraced adventure. Growing up in a small town in the United States, he often dreamed of traveling the world and experiencing new cultures. He had always been an explorer at heart, captivated by the idea of living outside the bounds of familiarity and comfort. So when he first discovered the Philippines during a solo backpacking trip a few years earlier, he knew that he had found something special. Welcome to this episode of Human Wreckage. He was an American abroad, a traveler, a son, a friend. Elliot Ono Eastman left the United States in search of a new chapter, finding himself in the Philippines, a country of vibrant culture, warm people, and for Elliot, a promise of fresh beginnings. But what began as a journey of discovery ended in tragedy. Let's get into it. In 2023, Elliot vanished under circumstances that raised more questions than answers. Days later, his body was discovered, and with it, the horrifying truth. Elliot Onal Eastman had been kidnapped and murdered. The story barely made international headlines. A few local reports, some social media speculation, but beneath the surface, there was something far more disturbing: a network of deception, unanswered calls for help, and the chilling possibility that Elliot's death wasn't random. Why was he targeted? Who was involved? And why, even now, do so many details remain buried? The people, the landscapes, the culture, it all spoke to him. It wasn't long before Elliot started to entertain the idea of making the Philippines his home. After spending several months traveling through different parts of the country, Elliot decided to relocate permanently. In 2023, he moved to Cebuco, a quiet town in Zamboanga del Norte in the southern Philippines. The stunning coastal views, the serene environment, and the friendly locals made it the perfect place to begin his new life. Elliot had always been an avid content creator, and his YouTube channel, which had started as a small project documenting his travels, blossomed into a full-time passion. His channel, Elliot in the Philippines, chronicled his experiences as an American in the Philippines, showcasing the local culture, food, people, and his personal journey. His vlogs were a mixture of adventure, humor, and heartfelt storytelling. As his subscriber count grew, so did his love for the country and its people. He even found a partner in the Philippines, marrying a local woman who shared his love for the country and for the kind of life he wanted to build. For Elliot, life seemed to be falling into place. He had a growing online community that appreciated his authenticity, a supportive wife, and a peaceful existence in a country he had come to love. He felt like he was finally living the life he had always dreamed of. The evening of October 17, 2024, started like any other for Elliot. He had spent the day filming a video about the beautiful beaches near Cebuco, capturing footage of the waves crashing on the shore and the local fishermen going about their daily routines. He was excited to edit the footage that night and share it with his growing audience. It was a typical day in the life of a content creator, a blend of work and joy. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and night began to fall, Elliot's world was about to change in the most brutal way imaginable. It was around 8 p.m. when Elliot heard a knock at the door. He wasn't expecting anyone, so he hesitated before opening it. He lived in a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, far from the bustle of city life. When he opened the door, 3 masked men stood on the other side. Armed and aggressive, they quickly barged into his home. Without warning, they overpowered him. The men were well prepared. One of them brandished a handgun, and before Elliot could react, he was shot. The first shot hit his leg, causing an explosion of pain. He collapsed to the floor, but his instincts kicked in. Despite the injury, he tried to fight back, desperate to protect himself. But the attackers were relentless. The second shot struck his abdomen, and that was when the resistance stopped. Elliot was left bleeding on the floor, struggling to hold on to consciousness. The men didn't seem to care whether he was alive or dead. They pulled him to his feet, dragging him through his own home, out the door, and toward the waiting boat on the shore. It was clear that they had no intention of leaving him behind. The attackers were not here for a simple robbery. They had come for something else, something much darker. Elliot's body, heavy with pain and the weight of his injuries, was forcibly shoved onto the boat. Despite his weakness, he fought against his captors, but it was no use. He was hauled onto the boat, and the kidnappers set course toward the Sulu Sea. The sound of the boat's engine roared in the distance as Elliot was taken away from everything he knew. The news of the abduction spread like wildfire. By the time local authorities were notified, the three kidnappers had a significant head start. The Philippine National Police PNP, in coordination with the military, immediately launched a search operation. The Sulu Sea is a vast, treacherous body of water, and the kidnappers knew the area well. It would be no easy task to find Elliot or to find out what had happened to him. As the search efforts escalated, the Philippines National Bureau of Investigation (NBI) joined in, and the United States government was notified. Elliot's family in the U.S. were devastated by the news. His mother, father, and siblings were in disbelief. They had no idea why Elliot was targeted, but the uncertainty about his fate was unbearable. Elliot's wife, also frantic with worry, immediately traveled to Manila to meet with local authorities, desperate for any information on her husband's whereabouts. Elliot's YouTube community was equally shaken. His fans, who had followed his journey for months, were horrified. The videos he had uploaded about the beauty of the Philippines had given his audience a sense of the place, the people, and the lifestyle he had come to love. Now they were watching the horror unfold in real time. Messages of support poured in from subscribers who had grown attached to Elliot and his channel. People from all corners of the world reached out to share their thoughts, hoping that Elliot would be found safe. As the search continued, the authorities began to consider several possible theories for why Elliot had been targeted. At first, the most obvious question was whether the kidnapping had been financially motivated. The Philippines, like many countries, has had its share of kidnappings for ransom, particularly in certain regions. But there were no immediate demands for money or any clear indication that the kidnappers had been after a ransom. Another possibility was that the abduction was a personal matter. Elliot had married a local woman, and some speculated that the kidnapping might have been linked to a personal dispute. His wife's family was well known in the area, and though there had been no obvious tensions, there were whispers about jealousy or hidden rivalries. However, these theories were unsubstantiated, and authorities cautioned against jumping to conclusions. The lack of communication from the kidnappers only deepened the mystery. There was no contact with the family, no ransom note, no demands. The kidnappers had not even identified themselves, leaving authorities with few clues to go on. Despite all the resources being poured into the search, there were no breakthroughs. The mystery surrounding Elliot's disappearance only grew more complex. Weeks passed, and the search seemed to stall. In early November, however, there was a breakthrough of sorts. Philippine authorities received word that they had located the men believed to be responsible for the abduction. In a tense operation, military forces and police confronted the kidnappers in the jungles of the region. A firefight ensued. 3 men were killed during the clash. The bodies of Mursid Ahad, Abdul Sahibad, and Fahad Sahibad were identified. They were known criminals with ties to various local factions. The confrontation, while bringing some sense of justice, did not answer the most important question. Where was Elliot? Although the kidnappers were dead, there was still no sign of Elliot. The authorities believed that the men had been in possession of vital information about his whereabouts, but they were unable to extract any further details from the suspects before they died. A cloud of uncertainty hung over the investigation. As November turned into December, the chances of finding Elliot alive continued to dwindle. The search, now focused on the waters of the Sulu Sea, turned up no traces of him. Despite the diligent efforts of the Philippine Coast Guard and the military, Elliot's body was never recovered. The hope of a successful rescue mission faded as the days wore on. For Elliot's family, the pain of not knowing what had happened to him was unbearable. His wife, who had spent countless hours speaking with authorities, was left with no answers. The search had turned into a waiting game, waiting for any shred of evidence that could bring her husband home. But as the months passed, the reality began to set in. It was hard to imagine that Elliot, wounded and alone, had survived the violent attack. Elliot's disappearance affected more than just his family. His online community, many of whom had never met him in person, were devastated. Over the years, Elliot had built an online presence that was genuine and engaging. His followers had come to see him not just as a YouTuber, but as a friend. He had shared his life with them, the good, the bad, and the ordinary. His story was their story, too. In the weeks following his abduction, fans from all over the world expressed their sorrow and their disbelief. Some created memorial pages in his honor. Others shared their favorite videos of Elliot, celebrating his adventurous spirit. It was clear that Elliot had touched lives in ways that many never expected. His story, though tragic, would live on in the hearts of those who had followed his journey. As the year drew to a close, there was still no closure. Elliot Eastman remained missing. His family and his wife continued to hope for a miracle, even as the investigation seemed to stall. The Philippine authorities had done everything in their power, but the outcome seemed increasingly grim. In the end, Elliot's disappearance is a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk in even the most beautiful and peaceful places. It serves as a tragic illustration of how quickly a life can be changed, how quickly it can be taken. For Elliot's family and those who loved him, the waiting continues. And for the millions who followed his journey, his story is a painful reminder of the unpredictable fragility of life. As of December 2024, Elliot Eastman's fate remains unknown. His story is still unfolding, and though the hope of finding him alive has all but vanished, the search for answers continues. Elliot Onal Eastman's journey to the Philippines was supposed to be a new beginning, a chance to experience a different world, to start fresh, to live freely. But instead, it ended with an unthinkable act of violence, far from the people and places he once called home. As we've explored over the past episodes, Elliot's disappearance wasn't just a tragic accident or a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was a failure of systems, of justice, and of international response. A young man was kidnapped and murdered, and yet so many questions remain unanswered. Who was truly behind his death? Why weren't warnings he shared taken seriously? And why, despite his family's tireless efforts, has accountability remained so distant? Elliot was more than a victim. He was a brother, a son, a friend. And though he's gone, his story must not fade. By telling it, by giving voice to his life and the injustice surrounding his death, we honor his memory and we shine a light on the dangers others still face in silence. There are thousands of Americans living, working, and traveling abroad right now. Elliot's case reminds us that not all of them come home, and when they don't, we owe it to them and to their families to ask hard questions, demand better answers, and refuse to let their stories disappear. Thank you for joining us.